Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you today. I do appreciate it. If you happen to be listening to the audio only, if you would go over to either YouTube or Rumble or the Tor Network, TNN Tube, give us a like, share, and all those good things. Really helps us out. Just lets us reach people, easier, really. It does. Been raining here where we live the last couple of days, and we really needed it, but it's kind of getting old. I'm ready for some sunshine again. When I was thinking about what I wanted to look at today, there's something that, I've talked about a little bit before, but never in this way. Typically, when we think of a venue, it's a place where something happens. Usually, a concert has a venue, but it's a change of venue is also a term used when a court case is moved from one location to another because they want to pull from a pool of jury panel members that are probably not biased. But there's also another way to look at a change of venue. It's used to describe something that takes place inside of us, in our hearts and in our minds. I'll use this example. A staunch atheist, okay? When they have that realization that, oh, God's real, and they see it for the first time that he really did create everything. He really does continue to create every new day. That is the kind of change of venue that takes place in the mind and in the heart. It's a shift of the way we understand something because we accept new information, so to speak. So we see this and we're looking at it and, I get a chance to talk to a lot of people. And it always seems to come around to this. A lot of people have this experience and they don't know how to describe it. They don't know kind of what to do with it. A lot of people I talk to were Christians of various denominations, and they realized, the traditions, the doctrines that they're following didn't conform to what they read in the Bible. There's been a few Jewish people I've talked to kind of felt the same way. They might not accept the complete Christian viewpoint, but they often kind of put off some of the traditions that they're practicing of modern Judaism, and they embrace the true worship the way that our Creator described it in His Bible. Everybody has to determine these things on their own. They have to make their own choice. And their reasons are very different quite often, but there is one similarity. There's always that one similarity, and it typically goes something like, what I was hearing from a pastor, a priest, maybe a rabbi, didn't fit what I was reading in the Bible. What they were saying was different than what I was reading. And this tells me two things right off the get-go. One is they're actually paying attention to what somebody's saying. And that's kind of amazing in itself in the world today, right? We have a very short attention span. But there was something more important that was happening, much more important. They were reading their Bible, actually slowing down, not to just skim over the pages and say, oh, I've done my reading for the week. These people were, as Meyer likes to say, actually reading the words, right? Some may have been searching for understanding, others looking for something else. Whatever their reasoning was, they were reading in the Bible. They were digging into the sacred word of the Creator, and they all came to the same conclusions, right? The traditions and doctrines of man is not the worship that our Creator desires or condones. For me, Leviticus 23, Verse 2 specifically, speak to the Israelites and say to them, these are my appointed feasts, the feasts of the Lord that you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies. For the first time I read that and actually understood what it said, after being taught for so many years that these were Jewish holidays, they didn't belong to us. We weren't to have any part of that. And then to read, these are my feasts, that hit hard. That hit hard. These are my feasts. They're not Jewish feasts. He never relinquishes ownership, right? Nowhere in the Bible can you see where he says, I'm giving you these feasts, do with them what you will. It's not in there. Hit me hard. I know someone, they were Christian. They had been taught that Jesus was Christian. That was their doctrine. And there was a reading one day, and apparently it was one of the times where Jesus was going up to Passover, going to Jerusalem for Passover. He says, well, why is he going to Passover? Christians don't celebrate Passover. And it was the first time they had to face the simple fact, Jesus was a Jew. He was from the tribe of Judah. He was a child of Abraham. Smacked him in the face. Another person I've spoken to he came face to face with a church who refused to hold a pastor accountable for adultery. Think about that. I met an older Jewish gentleman years ago. He suffered a stroke, and he had to deal with knowing that a lot of the traditions that he had been following, practicing, they couldn't help him. The only thing that was really going to help him was what was written in his Hebrew Bible. That's what helped him. If God has a way of getting our attention as individuals in a way that we can understand if we are willing to hear his voice and then listen. How we respond to this change of venue, it's a process. It really is. Some people will leave one set of traditions and they'll embrace another set for a little while. And then they'll realize, this isn't any better than where I was. So they kind of begin to think about living the way they're designed to live. Other people I know have gotten angry. They're like, how couldn't we see this before? Why was this so hidden? And here's my advertisement for the day. Okay, advertisement warning. Inheriting lies is where that comes from. Inheriting lies, that's where that comes from. It's found in the book of Jeremiah, by the way. Enough advertisements for the day. The books are available at authorjerrymitchell.com. Some are able to see the truth, but they reject it because it's just easier to follow the crowd. I don't want to make waves. I don't want to do anything that's going to get anybody in trouble. I'm not somebody that's going to ask questions. Other people, they're just kind of quiet about it. They just, something's not right here. I'm just going to, no, I don't want to be part of the Christmas pageant this year in church. No, I don't want to be part of the Easter pageant this year in church. No, I'm not going to participate in trunk or treats for Halloween. They quietly reject the empty traditions, the false doctrine, and they begin to practice what is written. And then they quietly accept the accusations of being legalistic or giving up on God or whatever else people can come up with. And then there's the ones like me. They don't stay quiet. Some people open their homes to Bible studies, fellowships. They seek out others that have had a similar change of venue and they begin to study together and they begin to grow together. And a lot of times what I've noticed is these are the folks who don't settle for the glossed over answers, the shiny answers that people like to give. They follow every rabbit trail, right? If they have a question, they're going to look. They're going to follow every rabbit trail. They're going to follow every clue until they exhaust every resource. And they're not searching for the answer they want. They're trying to reach an answer that cannot be argued with because it is so clear and so true. Maybe you've had a similar experience. Maybe you've had your own change of venue. Maybe you're struggling with it right now. You're not alone. You're not alone. A lot of us have been there. A lot of us are going through it. I talk to people several times a month now who are dealing with this. And they're not giving up on God. They're not giving up on who God is or what he can do. They're giving up on the empty traditions and the false doctrines that so many have really been tricked into because we have inherited the lies of our fathers. Doesn't mean we're being legalistic, not by any stretch of the imagination. It means we're doing our best to be obedient, doing our best to hear his voice, follow his instructions, where we are with what we have. Obedience is not legalism. If you think somebody's trying to trick you into that term, obedience is not legalism. But I can tell you this for certain. Disobedience is absolutely sin. Obedience is not legalism. If somebody's telling you you're being legalistic because you want to do the things that your Creator says you need to be doing, that's obedience, not legalism. But disobedience, everywhere you see it in the Bible, it is sin. It doesn't matter whether it's in Exodus, doesn't matter whether it is in 1 John 3:4. Sin is a violation of the word of our God. Something to think about until next time. And until then, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.